Welcome to the Regular Catholic Guy Show with your host, Jeff Garrett, a podcast for regular Catholic men who want to get into the trenches to learn about their Catholic faith, marriage, raising kids, and other Catholic guy stuff. Enjoy the show. Father?
Jeff, how are you?
I'm doing great.
And that's what we like to hear.
We're meeting on an unusual day. Usually we don't meet on weekends.
That's true. That's true.
But you're getting ready to go on retreat?
Yeah, I'm going on my my annual retreat next. Well, I'm actually leaving tonight to a secure and undisclosed location somewhere in the 50 United States.
It gives a wide range of areas that you could be in.
It could, yeah. So, if somebody wants to really try to track me down, start in Omaha and look for my trail. But now, a retreat is a wonderful time. It's an opportunity. It's not a vacation. It's much more restful than a vacation, because in a vacation you still have things that you want to do and things like that. A retreat is just time for you and God. And so I go to my retreat place, and I can take it out of gear and say, you know what? I don't have any meetings this week. I don't have any obligations. And then it's like, I just look at God and say, okay, God, this week is you and me. And man, it's a wonderful experience. If you've never been on a retreat, and speaking, I know you have, Jeff.
Yeah, I usually try to go at least on a couple a year.
Oh, that's good. But if you've never been on a retreat or even just a day of recollection, I wholeheartedly recommend it to you. To any of our listeners who might be going, is that for me? Yeah, it's for everybody. It's for everybody. And so if you're feeling frazzled and worn and all that kind of thing, and especially those of you who say, I would go to a retreat, but I don't have the time, you're the one who needs to go on a retreat. And even if it's just for a weekend or something like that, just to take it out of gear and say, all right, God, you and me.
I know a lot of guys that I come in contact with, they're afraid to go on that first retreat.
Yeah, you know what? It can be scary. And there's two different types of retreats, and I don't know which one's the more scary. There's directed retreat, where you have somebody who comes in and gives you a couple talks a day, and then you got time to meditate on and pray about it and things like that. Or you can do an undirected retreat, which is where you go to your retreat place, and then it's just, okay, God, you set the schedule, or I set the schedule, or whatever. But you don't have anybody who's preaching at you and things like that. It's important on ones like that to have some good reading material, and there's a lot of it out there. But to make sure you take some time for prayer. If you're scared to go on a retreat because you're afraid of what God might say, don't be. God is love. Don't ever forget that.
Well, enjoy your retreat, Father.
Well, I've certainly planned to, and thank you for your good wishes.
Our first question comes from Jared.
Jared, very good.
And Jared's question is regarding their family pet.
Okay.
Our dog is starting to get older, and we're starting to have discussions about what the end of life will look like.
Mm-hmm.
Is it a sin to euthanize our dog if he gets to a point where his day-to-day life is very uncomfortable for him?
Well, Jared, the short answer to your question is no, it's not a sin. Now, the long answer to your question goes a little bit more like this. It is a sin to euthanize a human being, but it is not a sin to euthanize a dog or any other form of animal life. It's an act of compassion in that case, and especially because, they don't have immortal souls and all that kind of a thing. So no, it is not a sin to euthanize your dog. It's hard to do, don't get me wrong. I've never had a pet personally because I don't have the time to care for one like one would need to be cared for. But I do know any number of people who have, and I've known several who have had to make that particular decision. And it is a difficult decision because we do love our pets. And to say that they've come to the end of their life is a difficult admission to make. We want them to live with us for the rest of our lives, but we don't get that option. So if your pet is truly suffering, Jared, I would say it'd be an act of compassion to say, all right, you've had enough. It's time to go. We can't make that decision for human beings because it's God's decision in our case. But for the pets that he has placed in our care, it's not a sin whatsoever. So, Jared, I feel for you. It's a hard decision. I'll be praying for you as you try to make that decision.
He has a follow-up to that.
Oh, okay.
And his follow-up is, does the church give any guidance on how to take care of the pet once it passes on? Is cremation allowed?
There are no guidelines whatsoever, Jared. Once your pet passes on, whether it's from you having him put to sleep or dies of natural causes or whatever it might be, you can do basically whatever you see fit with the remains. You can cremate them and put them in an urn and put them on your shelf, or you can bury them out in the backyard, or you can. There are pet cemeteries, which I think are kind of an odd thing, but I can understand it. There's all kinds of options for you, Jared, and there are no guidelines from the church, and there's nothing that you could do that would be sinful in terms of, is it okay to scatter the ashes? Yes, for a dog, it's okay to scatter the ashes. So if your dog had a particular favorite field where he liked to run and frolic and do all those things that dogs do, and you want to spread the ashes there, you go right ahead.
Our mom actually kept the ashes of our family dog in a urn.
Oh yeah, I've known any number of people who have done that kind of a thing. As a matter of fact, there's a great story about President Lyndon Johnson. Apparently, I think it was before he was president, but he had Johnson loved pets of all kinds, and he especially loved his dogs. And he had this dog called Old Beagle, and apparently, when Old Beagle died, Johnson was so broken up about it, he had the dog cremated, and he kept the ashes in an urn, and he kept it. I think like he put it on the mantle or somewhere. Well, maybe it was even in the kitchen, because apparently the family cook found out what was in the urn and said right to the face of the family, and I quote, and pardon the language, but the quote is, "Get that damn dog out of here."
Our next question comes from Mike.
Okay, Mike.
Mike asks, when should we take our Christmas decorations down? It seems that all my neighbors took theirs down the day after Christmas.
Oh, isn't that something that just when we're supposedly starting to celebrate Christmas, we quit? Our culture has it completely backwards, Mike. And I sense an instinct in your question that's a very good instinct that says, wait a minute, Christmas just started. Now, when to take the decorations down? First of all, there's no hard and fast rule as far as the church is concerned. But I would say this. Your decorations, first of all, when to put them up is a question. Let's even back up from your question, Mike. When should you put your decorations up? And again, no hard and fast rule, so there's no right or wrong answer. But my instinct is Christmas decorations are, for Christmas. Advent is a separate season. And during Advent, it seems to me the thing to do would be to have an Advent wreath in the house or something like that. And then come Christmas time is when you decorate for Christmas. It used to be the custom in like Austria and Germany and Bavaria, that's part of Germany, places like that, that you brought in the Christmas tree on Christmas Eve. And part of the celebration of Christmas was the family would decorate the tree together. And I think that's a beautiful custom, and we've lost it completely. So many people start decorating for Christmas as soon as they see the Christmas decorations in the stores, which go up about right after Halloween anymore. And that's because it's a moneymaker. And so our culture celebrates Christmas by we put up the decorations as soon as we can, and then the day after Christmas, it all comes down. Well, the Christmas season, it's got lots of little quirks and ins and outs and things like that. The entire Christmas season, Mike, as I'm sure you are well aware, starts on Christmas Eve with the first Mass of the Vigil, and it extends to the Feast of the Baptism of the Lord, which, as you and I, Jeff, are sitting here, is tomorrow. Okay? And the way the Christmas season works is you got Christmas, whatever day it happens to fall on. The next Sunday, assuming Christmas is not on a Sunday itself, the next Sunday is Holy Family. The next Sunday is Epiphany. And the next Sunday is the Baptism of the Lord. And that is the last day of the Christmas season. It takes the place of the first Sunday of Ordinary Time. And so you could leave your decorations up for the octave of Christmas. That would be from Christmas Day till the 1 week after Christmas Day, which is the Feast of Mary, Mother of God, New Year's Day. You could leave them up for the octave, and that would be okay. You could leave them up for the traditional 12 days of Christmas, going until January 6th, the traditional date of the Epiphany. We in the United States, we celebrate Christmas or the Epiphany on that Sunday, whenever it is. But like in Rome, it's still on the 6th of January. I think it's a holy day of obligation over there, to tell you the truth. So you could do that, leave it until Epiphany. You could leave it up until the Feast of the Baptism to do the entire Christmas season. Or, Mike, if you want to bust it old school and you want an excuse for, well, quite frankly, not getting around to taking your decorations down, you could say, well, I'm old school, I'm traditional Catholic, I leave them up until Candlemas Day, which is the Feast of the Presentation of the Lord, February 2nd. That was before the reform of the calendar and the liturgy and all kind of thing. That was the end of the Christmas season. They celebrated Christmas for 40 days. And it just started getting a little bit too close to the Ash Wednesday. You wouldn't have any time in between in some cases in the calendar. So they shortened it and then made it the Feast of the Baptism of the Lord. But if you want to leave your Christmas decorations up until February 2nd, tell everybody, well, I'm old school, you go right ahead. Bottom line, though, Mike, is there's no hard and fast rule, but I think your instinct is right that, people take them down right the day after Christmas on the Feast of Stephen, but they're missing so much of the Christmas season. And frankly, they're not even in the Christmas spirit. Christmas is what we do in December, and then as soon as December 25th comes along, we're done. It shouldn't be that way. I personally, and just giving you my opinion, I think you should leave your decorations up longer. But the exact date, Mike, that's up to you.
Thanks, Father. Joe asks,
okay, Joe,
how do we know that Satan actually exists? My pastor says there may be no one in hell. Is there a hell?
Oh, well, Joe, those are excellent questions. The best answer I can give you, number one, how do we know there's a hell? Because of divine revelation tells us that. Remember what hell is. Hell is the state of having definitively rejected God. And so therefore it's a place of great suffering and all that kind of a thing. Your pastor says there may be no one in hell. He's technically correct. The church teaches that there is a hell. Other than Satan and all the other damned spirits that went with him, the church does not teach that there's anybody specific in hell. The great theologian Hans Urs von Balthasar wrote a work called "Dare We Hope That All Men Be Saved?" And can we hope that all men are saved? Well, of course we can. That's what we pray all the time. I think especially that prayer that we use in the Rosary, the Fatima prayer. Oh, my Jesus, forgive us our sins, save us from the fires of hell, lead all souls to heaven. And we say that, sometimes we don't even think about it. But what we're saying, lead all souls to heaven. Okay, God, lead Adolf Hitler to heaven. Did that make you squirm just a little bit, make you uncomfortable?
Made me a little uncomfortable.
Well, yeah, but if you're saying lead all souls to heaven, he had a soul. We know the mercy of God is infinite. But then again, we also know that there is a capacity within the human soul to reject God completely. The only and the closest indication that we have that anybody actually is in hell is, if you remember the line that Jesus said at the Last Supper, "The Son of Man indeed goes as it is forecast of him, but woe to that man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It would be better for that man if he had never been born." That's pretty strong. Nevertheless, the church still does not even definitively say that Judas is in hell. So could it be that there's nobody in hell? Yeah, it could be. But that's up to God, not us. And it doesn't seem to me that it's really not anything we need to be bothering our heads about to wonder, is there anybody in hell? What we need to bother our head about is that there is a hell, and it is very possible to go there. And so we need, number one, to live our lives in such a way that we're heading the right direction. And number two, to help those around us do the same thing, particularly by our example and our prayer. Is there a hell? Yes. Do we know for a fact that there's anybody there? No. but that's up to God. That's not for us to worry about.
Our last question today, Father, comes from Daniel.
Daniel, okay.
He has a friend that is telling him that he should go to confession every couple of weeks. How frequently should you go to confession?
Well, Daniel, again, no hard and fast rule. There is one of the precepts of the church that says that you are obliged to go to confession once a year if you are conscious of having committed mortal sin. Okay? So if you haven't committed a mortal sin, if you haven't murdered anybody, if you haven't committed adultery, if you haven't stolen a large amount of money, if you haven't told lies, big lies about somebody behind their back to destroy their reputation, if you're not a Yankee fan, if you haven't committed any of these mortal sins, okay, all you Yankee fans out there, just settle down. I'm joking. But anyway, then there's no obligation for you to go to confession. Now, you didn't ask how often do I have to go to confession. You asked, and it's a very good way you put your question there. You asked how often should I go to confession. Okay, now there are a couple of parameters to keep in mind here. Joe, right?
This is Daniel.
Daniel, I'm sorry. Joe was the last one. Okay, my apologies, Daniel, and my apologies, Joe, and my apologies to anybody out there named Daniel or Joe. But anyway, couple parameters here, Daniel. Number one is you should go to confession as often as you feel the need to go to confession. Okay? And that's when you know you've committed a mortal sin. Yeah, get to confession immediately. Okay? That needs to be, once you've committed a mortal sin, priority one is get to confession. Because until you do that, Daniel, you are in grave danger of going to hell. Like we talked about in the previous question, hell is a definite possibility. And so, Daniel, if you are in a state of mortal sin, if lightning strikes you and you die, or you're in a car accident, or whatever happens, you're not going to head the right direction. So that needs to be priority one. If confessions are scheduled in your parish, call your priest and say, I need to get to confession. Now, let's say you're not conscious of having committed mortal sin. Does that mean you shouldn't go to confession? No, it doesn't. Because what is it that helps keep you out of mortal sin? God's grace. And what better place is there to receive the grace of God than confession? I can only think of one, and that's reception of the Eucharist. Okay? So, regular confession, Daniel, is a very, very important thing. What the church recommends for regular confession is about once a month. Your friend who said you should go every couple of weeks, that used to be the recommendation. And quite frankly, I don't see that there's anything wrong with that particular recommendation. But Daniel, you've got to kind of tailor that to yourself and your own situation. Some people are Christmas and Easter confessors. Okay, they'll go during Advent to prepare for Christmas, and they'll go during Lent to prepare for Easter. And I'm glad that they're going. If they get there twice a year, that's great. But here's one of the things about it, Daniel, and this is very important. The more you go to confession, the more you will become conscious of sin in your life. Okay? As a person who hears confessions, when someone comes in and says, bless me, Father, for I have sinned, it's been 8 months since my last confession, I know it's probably going to be a pretty short confession. It's always amazing to me for the people who come and say, bless me, Father, for I have sinned. It's been 1.5 years since my last confession. During that time, I took the name of the Lord in vain 3 times, and I had one impure thought. I was like, in 1.5 years? That'd be a pretty good morning for most people. Pardon me. As Richard Nixon said to Gerald Ford, pardon me, Jerry. And if you get that joke, you're showing your age. But anyway.
I got it.
Yeah, I know. Anyway, so the people who come in and say, it's been 8 months or whatever, it's probably going to be a pretty short confession. It's the ones who come in and say it's been 2 weeks, I sit back and get comfortable. Because those folks, due to the grace of God that they so regularly receive in confession, are able to see sinfulness in their lives where others might miss it. And that is a great gift and a great grace, because it helps you then to say, okay, this is something I need to root out. But the other folks, they're not even aware of it. They're like, well, it's been a year and a half and I took the name of the Lord in vain 3 times. It's like, well, you probably did a few other things too. It's so tempting in a case like that, Daniel, and I've never actually done this, but I'm tempted to. Like, for your penance, think harder next time. But like I said, I've never actually done that.
Or it could be like Padre Pio, and you could actually see
if I had that gift. Yeah, well, Padre Pio, he had the gift of being able to see people's souls. And so somebody come in and say, bless me, Father, for I've sinned. I did this, this, and this. And he'd say, well, what about that? Remember doing that one? And people are like, oh, how do you know that? I was like, well, I'm Padre Pio. What do you want? But that's why we always come back to this one, Daniel. It's so important to do a good examination of conscience. Okay?
Even on a daily basis.
Even on a daily basis. The church recommends the practice just before you go to bed at night is to examine your day, and some people even keep a journal of this stuff, and it helps them know what to say in confession. I've had people, and this is not an infrequent occurrence, I've had people bring their journals in and go through it as they're confessing to me to refresh their minds, refresh their memories. The church recommends that you do an examination of conscience every night before you go to bed. And then once you've realized what sins you may have committed that day, then say an act of contrition right there. And, people will tell you, and it's true, that you can have your venial sins forgiven in places other than confession. For mortal sin, you need to go to confession or make an act of perfect contrition, which even that still obliges you to mention those sins the next time you go to confession. But even though you can have your venial sins forgiven by receiving the Eucharist, by an act of contrition outside of confession, all kinds of things like this, still, it's a good idea to go to confession and get those sins forgiven, because just hearing yourself say them and hearing whatever counsel the priest can give you can help you get out of those habits of sin. And it's the venial sins that help pave the way toward mortal sins. So getting rid of them as best you can, especially in confession, is a really good way to stop committing them.
Thank you, Father.
Well, thank you, Jeff.
Enjoy your retreat.
Well, thank you.
If you enjoyed the show, share it with your friends and relatives. Go to Apple Podcasts, give us a review and a rating. It'll help us to reach more men. We also have a Facebook and Instagram page, Regular Catholic Guy. God bless.